Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Sikastrength and welcome back to Sikistan. Let's discuss one of the most controversial moments in recent weightlifting history, certainly in the last 2 decades, that just happened this previous weekend at the Paris 2024 Games. This is, of course, the Marin Robu versus Antonino Pizzolate press out bronze debacle. Now, before we break it down, take a look at events as they happened live, where Dara, Clarence and I were lucky enough to be there in person.
Antonino. What?
So, to paint the picture, we had Marin Robu and Antonino Pizzolate essentially vying for bronze as it came into the clean and jerk. Antonino Pizzolate finished on a 172 kilo snatch, missing 2 other snatches, and we had Marin Robu of Moldova finishing on a 175 kilo snatch. Coming into the clean and jerks, Marin Robu finishes his last successful attempt on 208 kilos, but clerks his third attempt at 212 kilos. Antonino Pizzolate opens at 212, misses it. Second attempt, 212, misses it again. Then comes out for his third attempt at 212 kilos, which you just saw there in that clip of the venue, and presses the barbell out and is immediately given 3 red lights. Now, before the coaches could even issue their challenge card, the jury intervened and gave Nino Pizzolate the lift. Now, what probably happened here is, if you watch the video, if you can find the clip, I may insert one here. If you don't see the clip, it means I couldn't insert it and the IOC assassins took it down for copyright. So if you're not seeing it, you'll have to go snooting on Instagram. Unfortunately, we can't risk the channel being taken down for one clip. So you'll see in this video that we have a shoulder depression, but we also have Nino's left arm rebending in the press out position. And as interpretation of the rules, as most people would read it, would be a red light for a lift that as such would be a no lift under the current rules in weightlifting. What likely happened is that the jury looked at the videos, intervened, and decided that the shoulder depression was the major cause of the issue, with the refs giving 3 red lights. So the jury intervened and gave him that lift, and that's based on their interpretation. So this, in effect, gave Antonino Pizzolate of Italy 1 more kilo over Marin Robu, and as a result, finished with Marin Robu in 4th and Antonino Pizzolate of Italy in 3rd with the bronze medal. So this brings up an entirely controversial rule that many people over the last couple of years have been arguing should not be in weightlifting any longer. It doesn't make any sense, and it doesn't seem to work in practicality. Now, up until the last couple of years, 5 or 6 years, we didn't see a very harsh interpretation of the rule. We'd certainly see some red calls, but as far as I can remember, we didn't really see any medals lost or international competitions really jeopardised based on interpretation of the rule. Really, maybe if we look at something like maybe Nijat Rahmat in the 2016 Olympics when he was a 77 kilo lifter, for example, on his 214 kilo attempt on his third lift, it may or may not have been in control. It's a lift that might split people 50-50 and would have given Liu Xiaojun the gold medal at the time. But outside of that, we didn't see a whole lot of really borderline calls where people lost their medals. However, this is certainly the first time after a number of years where the rule has been really heavily enforced, certainly during just last squad and leading up to Tokyo Olympics, where we've really seen an aggressive calling and refereeing on the rule. It seems to be a decision by the IWF where all judges in international competitions need to ref that rule really harshly. Now, the rule last year was talked about in one of the IWF Congress meetings where many bribes, I'm sure, were shared out among tiny espressos, was the fact that they probably need to take a look at the rule, and a lot of people were like, well, no shit. Now, based on this current situation that happened with Marin, Robu and Nino, I have a couple of opinions that are based on analysis of the sport, but also my personal opinion. So I'm going to give you my personal opinion first, and do remember, before you get kind of mad at me and before you leave any kind of angry comments, this is just my opinion, and this isn't in regards to the changes I think the sport needs. Look, Nino definitely had a lift that was 3 red lights. Robu lost out on a poor call, definitely lost his Olympic medal. That was 3 red lights. In my opinion, if I was judging it, I absolutely think Nino pressed out that barbell. But Nino also lifted more weight than Marin Robu. That's what weightlifting is about. The snatch and the clean and jerk, the barbell goes overhead, the barbell goes to the shoulder, and then overhead. In these two lifts, the combined total, who lifted the most? That's the spirit of weightlifting. That's the whole idea of weightlifting. Yes, it's nicer if it's aesthetic, but if it was all about aesthetics, Carlos Nazar wouldn't have any gold medals or any world records. I love aesthetic lifting. I'm a huge fan of it, but the spirit of weightlifting is who lifted most weight overhead. In this case, Nino lifted more weight overhead than Marin Robu. That's my personal opinion. That's kind of how I feel about it. So while I do feel for Marin Robu, he did lose out on a medal based on the rules. As the spirit of weightlifting goes, Antonino Pizzolate lifted more. I also just wanted to point out that Marin Robu had a third attempt to lift more weight in a clean fashion based on the rules, and he clarked his attempt. So that's my opinion on that. That's just how I feel, just in case people are wondering, which some of you might be. He had a third attempt to win, and he didn't make it. That's how sport goes. It's elite sport, and it sucks for both of them. Well, it doesn't suck for both of them. It sucks for Robu, essentially. But that's how I feel about that lift in general. Now, the situation at large, I think, would never have happened if we no longer had the press-out rule. There's this kind of argument that some people think that, lifters would be endangering themselves or you get a severe advantage from pressing out. But absolutely anybody who's lifted any reasonable amount of weight will tell you that there's no way that you could manufacture that press-out rule to put you in a position where you could end up lifting more weight. Would we see some uglier lifts making attempts? For sure. How large will they be? It's not that much of an assistance. If anything, it's no assistance at all. If you're trying to manipulate the rule, if we're seeing some rebend, something like that, I think it's very, very stupid that we give lifters 3 red lights. I don't think the rule as it stands, I think essentially eradication of that rule and seeing what happens would be certainly better than the current situations where we have international athletes losing medals based on interpretation. In theory, is it a nice rule? I actually think it is. I think cleaner, smoother lifts would look nicer consistently, but that's not what happened. There's been numerous cases across this whole Olympics with Leo Wanhua, Jason Lopez, who came in silver, pressed out his 210 kilos, a very obvious press out in my opinion. He still got his silver medal. We had Loredana Thomas snatch, and there is numerous other calls which I can't think of right now, which could have been going either way. But in reality, based on the interpretation of the refs, we want to remove as much outside interpretation and make the rule as simple as possible so that if an athlete gets the barbell overhead in that particular discipline, the snatch or the clean and jerk, they then get that lift. It becomes stationary if their legs are in line, if their knees are locked out, their shoulders are locked out, their elbows are locked out, the barbell is demonstrated to have control. Then I think that's as simple as we need to make it. We don't need to make this as complicated as possible. I think the press-out rule is only making things worse. Would perfect interpretation of that be better? Possibly, But I think a scenario where we don't have that rule in and see what happens in international competition would be more interesting. It'd be very easy for the International Weightlifting Federation to trial it at a test event, at a smaller continental event. Maybe we go Europeans, something like the Oceania region, and then we have the Pan Americans, where they all try it in a non-Olympic year where everyone's trying it at the same time with these international competitions, and see what happens. Because I think the current scenarios is upsetting for a lot of fans, and it's just kind of stupid in general. I don't want to use such verbose words, but that's the best way I can describe it. I think the rule as it stands right now isn't serving the sport of weightlifting, and I think it's making it worse. And it's certainly left a bad flavour in a lot of people's mouths after this Olympics, which would otherwise went off reasonably well. Those athletes trained really hard. A lot of them were in pain. A lot of them were injured. A lot of them been training for years for this moment in a very competitive quad. A lot of great athletes weren't able to make the Olympics, and rather than celebrating their successes, now we're left with this idea of several controversies which shouldn't have happened based on the spirit of weightlifting, which I don't think aids to it. So in my opinion, as I said a couple of years ago and probably all along, I think the press out rule is pretty stupid as it stands. Maybe a complete eradication is too much initially. Maybe a softening of the rule might be a good approach, but I think an eradication of the rule and seeing what that looks like is worth a try, given that we've seen over the last number of years that it hasn't been working, especially with the change in judging. Now, the IWF said that they will look at the rule after Paris Olympics. What does that mean? Well, it probably means that we'll see very little change in any immediate fashion, and likely we'll see very little change in effect, because they just don't really care, do they? So, some personal opinions there, some larger opinions in general. I think a lot of people agree that the press out rule is pretty stupid as it stands, because it's just not practical to implement. It's just not practical to judge unless we'd some unbelievable software implemented. But even then, even if it is 100% practical, if some technology was invented that we could implement the rule and judge it perfectly, I still don't think it really matters. Does the barbell go overhead in the snatch? And is it finished with locked out arms? And is the barbell stationing control demonstrated? Did the barbell go overhead in the jerk? Is it finished with locked out arms, locked out legs, feet in line? Then I think it's a good lift. That's what it's about. I don't think it's about pure aesthetics, because it's not going to end up, in my opinion, and I'll be happily proven wrong here, but we're not going to end up with a situation where lifters are going to be aggressively pressing out the barbell. A faster, better lift is better than pressing out a barbell. And if we see a little bit of rebend on some occasions, then it's a reactive mechanism as opposed to a direct improvement. That slower pressing motion isn't better than the dynamic effect of the lifts. So as such, it will be interesting to see what happens. Was Robu robbed? For sure, based on the rules. However, the rule is stupid, so there's a lot of interpretation. So I feel for kind of both these athletes. I feel like Nino, deserves his bronze medal because he trained hard and he lifted more. But I also feel for Robu because he lost the medal based on the technicality that he should have gotten, and he can only play by the rules in the sport. So I do feel for both of them. I will say one thing as well. I don't really like seeing people commenting on Nino's posts and other places where people are saying that he doesn't deserve the bronze medal. But I understand that people want to exercise their opinions, and not everyone has a YouTube channel like this where I'm going on and I'm saying my opinion here. So I do appreciate that. But do please try to be kind to the athletes. They've both trained hard for this, and it's a sticky situation. Nino's not going to give back the bronze medal. None of you would. I wouldn't give back the bronze medal. No sport ever gives that up. If a rugby match is lost on referees, if a boxing match is lost on calls or points, that athlete is going to take that and run with it, because you'd be stupid not to. Is it a funny kind of win? Sure. Or a funny kind of victory in that regard? Absolutely. But do try put yourself in people's shoes and be nice to the athletes. It's a small sport. It's intimate. It's not nice for those athletes. Nino's not going to say, you know what, Robo, you deserve the bronze medal. Maybe in a perfect world should that be the answer? Probably. But Nino has to make a living, and it's a tough situation. So please do be nice to the athletes. Be nice to me as well if you have any conflicting opinions. I'd be interested to hear what you think. Do let me know if you think there's a better way of constructing the rule, the press out rule. I know a lot of people are very au fait with the rule set and have some opinions, so I am very interested to hear that. My opinion is I would just like to see a trial, and that's just the best way, an experiment, and see what happens if we attempt to do some competitions, international competitions at larger lifters, or even you could manufacture a test event. You could do an IWF Grand Prix where you say no world records can be set, or continental records, for example, and we just get a series of athletes, put up a decent bit of prize money to encourage some of those athletes to come. Do it next year before the Olympics started again, and just see what happens. Just say no presser rules, just the demonstrate control at the finish of the lift, keep the elbow touch rules, keep the knee touch rules, the 2 points of contact as well, fine, and just see what happens. I think that would be very, very interesting. Now, is that too dynamic and pro thinking for the IWF? Probably, so we probably won't see that, but I would be interested to see what that would look like. So, will something change? Who knows? Let me know your thoughts below. I'm very, very interested to see what people think. I think that just getting rid of the rule is a better scenario and see what happens as be compared to what happened this past weekend. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed Sika Strength and today's video. Please do leave a like and a comment, as it makes a huge difference to the algorithm.